Will the US launch a ground invasion? It'll be a catastrophe whether or not they win or lose. So right now, the United States and Israel are primarily focused on an air war, striking Iran from a distance. In the past, we would call this siege warfare.
That right there is the correct term for what we are watching right now. Airstrikes from a distance, no boots on the ground, trying to break the other side's will without ever getting close enough to bleed.
And as long as it remains an air war, the United States can choose to de-escalate and withdraw from the Middle East. They would lose this war, but the loss would not be catastrophic. Whereas if they choose to launch a ground invasion, it would escalate very quickly and they would be trapped in Iran for the next 5 to 10 years. It would be a catastrophe whether or not they win or lose.
This is the oldest military play in the book, and it almost never works by itself. Remember that point because it's going to matter a whole lot by the end of this video.
Because in order to fight a ground war, the United States would have to institute a national draft.
I need everybody to hear what he just said because most people are going to skip right past it. A ground invasion of Iran means a draft, meaning your 18-year-old gets a letter in the mail telling him to report for duty. That is not a talking point on cable news. That is a math problem. Iran has 88 million people and terrain that makes Afghanistan look like a children's daycare.
Will nukes be used? The Americans used them at the end of World War II, and no one's used them ever since. And the third question is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is the third holiest site in the Islamic world. There's Mecca, there's Medina, and there's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Muslims believe that it is from the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem where Muhammad ascended to heaven. And the Jews believe that the Al-Aqsa Mosque sits on the site of their temple. Extremists want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque to rebuild the third temple. And if the religious Jews, the extremists, destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, then the 2 billion Muslims in this world.
This is the part most Western analysts completely ignore because they do not take religious motivations seriously. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is not just a building. It is the third holiest site in a religion practiced by almost 2 billion people on this planet. Destroying it would not be a regional event. It would be a civilizational trigger. He is going to make a prediction about this later, and I have thoughts on it. So hold that in your mind.
Would be religiously obligated to go to war against Israel. I'm going to make 3 predictions. And then I will show you my analysis as to how I make these predictions, okay? Now, what's important to understand is that these are only my guesses based on my analysis. And whether or not they turn out to be correct will determine the validity of my analysis.
I actually respect that line because he is doing something almost nobody does in this space. He is making specific, testable predictions and telling you up front that if he is wrong, his whole framework falls apart. That is how real analysis works. You put your neck out and let the results judge you. Most of the people you see on television would never do that in a million years.
I don't have inside information. I don't know more than you do, okay? I'm just working out of public knowledge and doing game theory analysis. So according to game theory, this is yes. The United States will send in ground troops. According to game theory, this is no. And number 3 is yes. I know there's a lot of concern from around the world that nukes will be used. And I am 100% confident that nukes will not be used at this time in this war. And if I'm wrong, we'll all be dead anyway. So in military affairs, in geopolitics, there's a concept called escalation ladder. The dominant theory is that whoever has escalation dominance has the most advantage.
All right, now he is getting into the meat of it, and I need you to pay close attention here. The escalation ladder is one of the most important ideas in military strategy, and almost nobody outside of war colleges ever hears about it. Think of it like a staircase where every step up means more violence, more commitment, and less room to walk it back. The question is never just who is stronger, it is who controls which step they are standing on.
Okay, so what this means is, let's just say you and I get in a fight, okay? I have a knife, you have a gun. Well, a gun is more dominant than a knife. Therefore, you have a greater advantage over me, and therefore you should win, in theory, okay? And applied to this war in the Middle East, Israel and the United States have escalation dominance because they have nuclear weapons, and Iran doesn't. Therefore, the United States and Israel have a huge advantage over Iran, okay? But what I will show you today is that this theory is incorrect. Let's just say that two people get into a fight, okay? A and B. And how the escalation ladder will work is that maybe A and B run into each other, okay? And then A says, hey man, say sorry. And then B is like, it's not my fault, you say sorry, okay? So there's a conflict, and it's usually a very small conflict. No one knows why, and no one knows who's at fault, okay? So they start cursing each other, okay? So the first step is a conflict. Second step is they start cursing each other, right? Screw you, screw you. And then they might start pushing each other, right? Push, push. And then they hit each other, okay? Punch, punch. And then they start the fight. And then one pulls out a knife and the other pulls out a gun. All right? And then B shoots dead. A, fight over, right?
Now this is where it gets really interesting because he is about to challenge the most basic assumption in geopolitics. The assumption is simple. Whoever has the bigger weapon wins the fight. America and Israel have nukes. Iran does not. So America and Israel should dominate. But if that were true, we would have won Vietnam, and we would have won Afghanistan, and we would have won Iraq. But we didn't. And the reason why is exactly what he is about to explain.
Okay, so there are certain things that we need to keep in mind about this example. First of all, the fight is not contained in itself, okay? You cannot perceive this game as just one between A and B, who's physically stronger. There are other players involved as well. Okay, so for example, there are spectators or friends. There's a crowd watching you, okay? This is important because there's also the police, right? Eventually the police will come, the government, and they'll ask people, hey, what happened, man? Whose fault was it? There's three factors that you have to consider that drive people up this escalation ladder. These three factors are, of course, emotions. Second is power. And the third is reason or logic. Okay? And what drives people up is adrenaline. It's not about how fast you climb up the escalation ladder. Okay? If you get too angry and you overreact, then you are at fault, right? What you want to do is climb it up strategically.
This is the part most people never think about when they talk about war. A fight does not happen in a vacuum. There is always an audience. There is always a judge. And the judge decides who was in the right. In geopolitics, that judge is world opinion. It is the United Nations. It is your own citizens watching the news every night. You can win the fight and still lose everything if the world decides you were the bully.
That means you have to remain calm and controlled. Because if you remain calm and controlled, you have three advantages over your opponent. The first is focus, clarity, and the third is resolve. Okay? What this means is that you know what you're doing, you have a strategy, you are clear about how to achieve your strategy and your goal, and you are determined to achieve it, okay? So the main idea I want you to remember is this, and this is the law of escalation. And this is a very important idea in my game theory model. Control is more important than dominance.
That is the single most important line in this entire video, and I need you to burn it into your brain. Control is more important than dominance. That means it does not matter how many aircraft carriers you have if you cannot control what happens next. Iran understands this, and the United States historically does not. And that gap is where empires go to die.
Okay? Control is more important than dominance. Why? Because control is the idea of calibration. Calibration means that you time or you structure or you strategize your response in a way that helps you achieve your strategic objective. Okay? You're not just throwing punches, you're throwing a punch in a certain way that allows you to defend yourself, that strikes fear in the opponent, and also allows you to seem as the good guy among spectators. Okay? And then when the police come, you can justify why you threw that punch in a certain way to the police so that you don't go to jail. Okay? All right, so another way of saying this is that calibration is ultimately about strategic flexibility. And the idea of strategic flexibility is, in a fight, the person who has the most options, the person who has the most flexible strategy will usually win the fight.
Now the Al-Aqsa Mosque question is the one that keeps me up at night. He predicted it would be destroyed, and I think the pressure to do it is real. There are absolutely extremist factions in the Israeli government who see this war as their once-in-a-generation opportunity. But I'm not as certain as he is that they pull the trigger on it, because the consequences are so catastrophic that even the most fanatical planners have to pause. Destroying the third holiest site in Islam does not just start a war. It starts a religious conflict with no end date and no negotiating table. That is a door you cannot close once you open it. But here's the thing that ties all of this together, and this is the real lesson from the clip. He said control is more important than dominance. And that is not just true for Iran and America. That is true for you sitting right there watching this video. The system we live under works exactly like that escalation ladder. They want you climbing it emotionally, reacting to every headline, every outrage cycle, every political stunt designed to keep your adrenaline pumping so you cannot think straight. The person with control wins, not the person with the most anger. That means when you see these headlines about war with Iran or troops being deployed, your job is not to panic. Your job is to understand the game so you can see the moves before they happen. So let me ask you something directly, and I want you to put this in the comments. Do you think the United States will send ground troops into Iran? Yes or no?